We're joined now by Sergei Sumlerny with Russia Consulting, helping German businesses in the Russian market. Tell us, with sanctions getting tougher, what should Western companies do if they still want to work in Russia?
If a Western company wants to continue business in Russia, it has to follow a few very simple steps. First of all, checking out all its contacts. As you know, the American and European sanctions ban any business contact with companies on the sanctions list, as well as their subsidiaries if they control 50% of the shares or more. A foreign company in Russia has to check the ownership structure of each company it's dealing with, suppliers, customers, partners, etc., and see if they are directly or indirectly linked to the blacklist.
I suppose that means Western companies have to really change the way they work under the sanctions. Do you see business quitting the Russian market because of that?
Obviously, this concerns the companies operating in the sectors most affected by the sanctions. For instance, the German companies that supply military equipment or dual-use equipment, or, for example, oil extraction technologies. All these areas are under sanctions now. Companies need to revise their work format and decide if they want to stay in Russia. But it should be clear that all the affected sectors represent a relatively small number of companies. In general, most German companies in Russia sell machine tools or provide services. They are not directly affected by the sanctions. They're still working, but they definitely need to check out all their business relations. In general, German and European companies are continuing to work in Russia because it's still an attractive market for them. Certainly, the spiral of sanctions is unbalancing business strategies somewhat. We know that a large number of companies have already frozen their investment projects in Russia. Companies are trying to put their money on hold. But they're keeping their long-term plans. For example, most German companies in Russia are medium-sized. Around 6,000 of them are working in Russia now. So their plans are long-term plans, not for a few months or a year. Their strategy is designed for several years or even decades. And with a long-term vision, these companies are going to stay in Russia.
European sanctions have provoked Russian government so-called counter-sanctions. How might this affect Europeans' willingness to stay in this market?
Sanctions always provoke a response. We're in a situation that threatens to become a vicious cycle of sanctions. The Russian authorities have already said they'll respond to European sanctions. If Europe, in turn, the EU, imposes more sanctions, the situation would become even more difficult for companies. Business would get very uncomfortable if sanctions begin to spread, creating more and more problems with investment.